in the relationship between you and maybe a narcissist is not you. It is more the narcissist. Okay, I'm doing a little happy dance because I just realized recently that a lot of you don't know that the codependent in the relationship between you and maybe a narcissist is not you. It is more the narcissist. And I'm going to show you 3 ways in which you can quickly look at them and notice that they are actually the codependent and that you have more power than you can possibly imagine. Number 1, understand that a narcissist is almost always codependent, but a codependent person isn't necessarily a narcissist. So if you have been with a narcissist for a long time, it's probable that you have a little codependency that you're working on and you're going to be able to get out of that grip without much hassle. However, the narcissist, it's ingrained in them to be a complete codependent. So before we go on, we have to talk first about what really is codependency, because a lot of times that word is thrown around even if someone just likes being with someone else. And codependency is really a deeper topic. Now, I'm not going to go in detail because it is a deep topic, but I'm going to tell you that with codependency, it's a lot about losing yourself, losing your sense of self, and losing a lot of your own truth. So what does that look like? A really easy example is the mother of children, and when the children go off to school or they get on with their lives and they're out of the house, she might feel a very deep sense of loneliness, or that she doesn't know who she is anymore, or she doesn't know what to do with herself. This can also happen when a woman or a man is living through their spouse. So much so that when the spouse isn't around or when the spouse leaves, they don't know what to do with themselves because their entire identity is now wrapped up in being around that person and who they are, an appendage of that person or those children. So codependency is a lot about losing your sense of self. And when you're with a narcissist, they work really hard for you to lose yourself so that they can get that energy and keep control of you. But surprise, surprise, they are actually the ones who are very codependent. Now, let me back up one more time. You will often see a codependency in teenage relationships where the boy and the girl really want to control the other person. They want to know everywhere they're going and they lose a sense of themselves. They get very involved in the other person's hobbies a lot of times and they lose themselves. It's a very immature, very codependent relationship. And that's where they're learning how to be their own person and still be in a relationship. With a narcissist, it's a little bit different. A narcissist is always living in a sense of fantasy. It doesn't matter if they're grandiose, it doesn't matter if they're covert or some kind of conglomerate of all of that. They are always living in some kind of a fantasy. So for instance, they work really hard at being whatever that fantasy is that is important to them. So if they're more of a grandiose narcissist, it's really important for them to be seen as very high achieving, very successful, maybe very attractive, very wealthy, whatever that thing is for them that they want to achieve or they want to be seen as, it's very much a part of their fantasy. With someone who's more covert, they want to be seen as a victim. They want to be seen as a victim of their husband who's so mean to them, or their children who are ungrateful, or their job who takes advantage of them. It's always something with them. So the covert narcissist really creates a big act, a big drama around being a victim. Now, it's very different than someone who really is going through trouble or abuse. Okay, very, very different. All narcissists, all of them are in a fantasy, okay? All of them. There's not one that's like steeped in reality, but they just have some narcissistic tendencies. They are all in a fantasy. Whether you know it or not, they are in a fantasy. So that fantasy is that they are perhaps very high achieving and successful. And even if they are high achieving and successful, they think they're more high achieving and more successful than you can possibly imagine. And if they're covert and they're a victim, trust me when I say they think they are such a victim. They don't see the good in anything that's coming around them. They think that their children, their partners, everybody is out to get them, or that they are taken advantage of all of the time. And they tend to be people who love strangers. So they love the new people at church, or the new people in some group, or the new mom's club. They love new people, and they make a very big point of basically espousing all of the wrongs that have been done to them to these new people, because that's part of their fantasy. And as long as the new people buy that story, the fantasy is still alive. So they put a really big effort into creating their stories, whether they are stories of achievement or stories of victimization. Which leads me to 3 trademarks that you know you are dealing with a narcissist who is incredibly codependent. Now, they're all codependent in some way, but they're usually very codependent if you see all 3 of these, but you're always going to see at least one of them. Normally, you are going to see all 3 of them. So go ahead and comment below if you've noticed any of these 3 or all of these 3 in the narcissist in your life. So number 1 is a sense of shame. Now, you're not going to see this right away. So if you've been someone who has been trying to get a narcissist to love you, you know that sense of shame that you feel. The difference between you and a narcissist is that you understand it's a sense of shame, a sense of sadness. You feel like you're not good enough in some way, and you can feel that. A narcissist is a little bit different. So they have that shame within them, but they do not want to deal with it. And so what they do instead is they create, again, another fictional story around that. And you might think that that narcissist has some inflated sense of self-image and self-love, and you're half right with that. They do have an inflated self-image, but that self-image doesn't mean that it's a positive self-image, okay? So sometimes it's a really negative self-image. They often self-loathe. Even a grandiose narcissist has a lot of self-hate. So what does that look like? So they tend to be very dramatic. That drama is not just they tell a really lively story. It's dramatic and they're very much a victim and they really want you to feel sorry for them. The other sense of drama is, look at me, look how amazing I am. Don't you want to be basking in my afterglow and be a fan of mine? So the very dramatic, self-centered narcissist loves to have a fan club. They love to have people in awe of them. That is part of their shame. And then someone who is very much a victim, who needs a lot of pity and a lot of guilt, or they like to create dramas where someone is mad at someone else, they are in that victim shame. Either way, that's shame, because no one who is, wrapped tight, you don't necessarily want drama in either direction. You don't want people to feel sorry for you. You don't want people mad at other people. And you certainly don't need a whole fan club in order to feel good about yourself. The other area that is really quite interesting is the second area, which is denial. And denial is different for the old run-of-the-mill codependent that we all have maybe had little touches of once in a while. That's where you might really like someone and they don't like you back, and you think about it a little too long and you focus a little bit too much on it. That's a little bit of codependency, where you're putting a little too much energy into what someone else thinks of you and you're defining yourself by them. So you have a loss of self, a loss of self-centeredness because of whatever they have going on. That's a little codependent. And I'm not talking about hardcore codependency where you cannot have a relationship. I'm talking about just a real mild touch of it so you understand what it feels like. Now, a narcissist who is in denial is in a whole different ball game. Okay, so they're in denial because they want to be a victim if they're covert, and there's nothing that you can tell them to make them feel like they have any kind of power. So if they're really overweight and they need to work out and they need to eat healthy, they will give you 75 million reasons why they can't do that. So they always have an excuse, and they need those excuses, because without the excuses, they have to face reality. And in facing reality, that means they can't be in denial anymore and they have to be accountable. So a narcissist will not want to face reality. They will need to stay in denial to keep their victim story going. Also, if someone is more grandiose, whether or not they are truly successful or not, whether or not they are truly beautiful or have some heightened skill, it doesn't matter. They still have a much higher view of themselves as far as self-image, even though they're self-loathing. And they need to keep that fantasy story going that they are above everyone else, because if they are the same as you and I and just regular old people, then they're not special anymore and they can't keep that storyline going. And if they can't keep that storyline going and they have to be just like us, then they're not special and they need to be accountable as well. They can't get away with things if they're just regular old people, right? So they need to keep the storyline that they're very special and they have different liberties and different things that they can do and say that they think that they can get away with, different behaviors. So they need to be in denial to keep that storyline going. Someone who is just codependent is not going to want to keep any kind of a storyline going, because if you're codependent only, you're going to want to have some kind of closure and peace. And you know the way to peace and closure is self-awareness. The last thing that a narcissist wants is self-awareness. The last thing. And remember also that your little narcissist, whether they are grandiose or covert, needs to keep that denial going, okay? Because if they don't have that facade and that mystery, they can't manipulate the truth. And the last thing that a narcissist lives by is truth. So here's another area that's really important for you to know about narcissists, is that they're extremely boundary crossing. Now, codependents unto themselves are extremely boundary crossing. So someone may be codependent but not a narcissist, and they're always the person that will want to hug you, or they will always tell you about their intimate life and you don't want to hear it, but they're going to tell you anyway. Or they're going to prod you into trying to talk more about your personal life and you don't want to share it. And they will just keep asking questions and asking questions. They are the person who will maybe buy gifts more often and you feel uncomfortable with those gifts or whatever. They just don't like to keep a certain level of boundary. And the reason why they're doing that, if they're a general codependent, is that they want love and they want affirmation. So they want to project some of what they're lacking onto you. And so by giving you a hug or having a conversation with you that is more intimate that you're ready for, or by buying you expensive gifts, sometimes that feels like to them, there's more of a deeper bond than is actually there. And of course, if that bond is not real and is not gradually brought forth, it is fodder for having no bond at all and no intimacy. So that's why a lot of codependents have a lot of heartbreak, is because they think what's happening and what they're doing feels really good and feels really loving in the beginning, but it's not. It's actually just setting them up for failure, some of their actions and behaviors and feelings that they're projecting. So how is that different than a narcissist? Because a codependent is really suffering and they are very good-hearted often. But if you're a narcissist and you're codependent, which almost every narcissist is, it's a whole different ballgame again. Because a narcissist who is codependent and pushing boundaries is doing it in a manipulating way. So a narcissist who is also very codependent is not going to hug you and blindly think, oh, well, maybe they need a hug. I'm going to hug them, even though I don't know if they want a hug. They're not going to innocently go for that hug the way a codependent might do it because they're projecting their feelings. A narcissist just doesn't care what you want. They're going to push your boundaries in a manipulating and also a diabolical way, because it's not about you being healthy. It's not about you being happy. It's not about anything that you feel. It's about what they want, their needs, their desires, and what they want in any given moment. So in one moment, they might want to be very huggy, and in the next moment, they don't want to talk to you. It's always about what they want in that moment. And they tend to be a little bit on the moody side, so you never know what they want. It's never consistent. So some of those boundaries are going to look and feel like love bombing and overwhelming and intense. And some other boundaries are going to be very standoffish and very much ghosting and very cold and icy. You never know what you're getting. Now, if you're an innocent codependent, if you're innocently searching for a relationship, you might first look at that back and forth mood swing thing as fun or hard to get, or any of those kind of things that movies have made up as being positive, but it's really dysfunctional. It's really horrible, and you deserve more. So understand that as much as you might feel desperate, as much as you might feel that you need the narcissist, and you know that they're after your energy, but you can't quite put a finger on what does that mean, that energy, it's really because they're desperately seeking whatever their narrative is for their fantasy. And as long as you're filling that fantasy, that is their codependency. And that's why gray rocking, which means basically being very stoic and standing back from their emotions, why that works so well is because you're not feeding their fantasy anymore. The minute you stop feeding the narcissist's fantasy, They want to back away from you because they don't want to see who they really are. They don't like who they see in the mirror. And regardless of whether they're the eternal victim or grandiose, no matter how much you think that they love themselves, that's really not the case. They can't stand who they are. They don't like to look in the mirror, even if they do it often. They don't like who they are at all. They don't have much sense of self, and they're not going to develop it on their own. They're going to have no sense of self. They're only going to have hobbies and activities that they think other people like or other people find interesting. And they're only going to like you as much as you can support their narrative. So the codependent narcissist is very much alive, and they are not well, and they are very, very dangerous. So understand that not only is the narcissist going after your energy, but they are the most heightened type of codependent that you could possibly ever run into. And if you think of codependency as a desperate need, the narcissist is actually very weak inside, and they give the illusion of having strength. And that's the dangerous part. They are going to pounce on you and take you for whatever you're willing to give, and it's going to be very dangerous and very uncomfortable for you. It's definitely not something that you should think of as a compliment. So if a narcissist is really aggressively coming after you, or aggressively love bombing you, aggressively trying to push your boundaries, or create a narrative where you're either feeling sorry for them or in awe of them, do understand that that is not complimentary. That is just them using you. It has nothing to do with you personally. You just happen to be the living, breathing body in front of them. So I don't want you to feel like that's a beautiful thing, because I'm telling you, a lot of people do in the beginning. Even sometimes 10 years later, they think it's a good thing, and it's not. It's etching away at who you are, and you're filling up the narcissist who's empty, and they're eternally empty. So there's nothing that you're going to be able to give them or support them with, help them with. They're going to be that same person at the end of the day. And they will go in and out of relationships just like that. And it won't matter who the person is. The people in front of them, meaning you, are very interchangeable. It doesn't matter. So there are the three ways, the three most prevalent ways that a narcissist is much more codependent than you can ever claim to be or think that you are in any way, shape, or form. You're not manipulating, you're not a horrible person. And if you are a narcissist looking at this, which probably wouldn't happen, then you probably need to get some help, and you probably need to stop hurting people. But most narcissists would not have lasted through even 30 seconds of this video. So if you're still here, you're probably not a narcissist, and you're probably someone who needs to get away from one or get over the hurt that someone once did to you because of these behaviors. Now, I have a PDF for you all about self-value on my website. The information is below, and I have another video for you.